play it for you. Let me get the right one. If there is any paid commissions, I will try and skip the ads.
9 teenagers are now charged with murder. They're accused of being part of a plot to lure a fellow teenager to a place where someone he knew was waiting with a gun. And all of this was allegedly over a girl. Right now, we know the names of 5 people who are facing charges in this story. And when we were researching the newest names to be added to the list of suspects in this case, we were shocked with what one of the teens now charged with murder had apparently posted on her social media not too long ago. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. I have an update for you today on a story that we have been following out of South Carolina. It is a story of a group of young people who allegedly, according to police, came together to lure a fellow teenager to a place where he would be murdered. And all of this was allegedly over something that I think we can all agree in the grand scheme of life does not really matter, and that is teenage romance. This story has become even bigger since our first episode on this case, which was back in June. And it involves the man you see here, Trey Wright. He was just 16 years old. On June 24th, police say they found him with multiple gunshot wounds around 11:30 p.m. along a country road in South Carolina. Before I get to the new suspects in this case and what one of them allegedly posted on Facebook, let's get you caught up to speed on how we got to this point. This is Devin Raper. He is the man who police say fired the bullets that killed Trey Wright. Raper appeared to try to put on this bad boy persona on social media. He has a TikTok that's still public, and you can see some of the pictures like this one here, where he's flipping the bird at the camera, and he has the caption, "I wish we never met. I wish you would have stopped giving me missed signals, but can you stop? Because I'm trying to get to know your friend right now." Now, Trey, it appears, knew his alleged killer. They both followed each other on TikTok, but they were not friends. According to police, they were reportedly at odds over a girl at the time of Trey's murder. Now, it's unclear if this is the girl that they were fighting over. Her name is Gianna Kistenmacher, and she was reportedly Trey Wright's girlfriend. The 17-year-old is charged with orchestrating his murder. The Florence County Sheriff's Office says that Kistenmacher knew that there was a rivalry between Trey Wright and Devin Raper, and deputies say that she drove Raper to meet Wright on the night of his murder, quote, knowing that Raper was armed and that there would be a confrontation for violence likely to lead to death based on statements made in her presence. Now, she was initially facing a charge of accessory before the fact, and she was denied bond at that time, but her charges have been upgraded. She is now facing a charge of murder in connection to the death of Trey Wright, yet she's now out of jail. She was released on bond under strict conditions. Now, Raper is being held without bond. He is the one who allegedly fired the shots in this case. At his first court appearance, he tried to argue for himself in front of the judge. This is how it went down. This video.
And you should never argue with a judge. He obviously's got spoiled brat boy syndrome.
Video per WBTW.
I did not do none of this. There was 4 more people.
All right, I'm not here to try.
I understand that.
I'm not here to try your case, but you can speak to law enforcement and you can also.
They won't.
Before I get to the new suspects in this case, it's important to know that Raper was known to the criminal justice system. He was arrested in August of last year on a charge of being an accessory after the fact to felony or murder, and he was released from jail in November, and then the charges were dismissed in February.
Why is it teenagers so young have to commit these heinous crimes? You know, they got their whole life ahead of them. I'm sure they've got inspiration of what they want to be when they finish school and maybe go to university or college and, you know, get a good career for themselves and then settle down and have families like most parents wish for their children. So why do they go and fuck it up? It's beyond me.
of this year, according to WBTW. Now, you heard Raper in that court video claiming that other people were involved in what happened, saying that there were 4 more people that were in the vehicle with him. Now, it's unclear who he specifically is talking about, but this week, police arrested 3 more teenagers. Here are their mugshots. Their names: Corinne Belviso, Hunter Kendall, and Sydney Kearns. All 3 are now facing charges of murder. Now, it appears Belviso and Kistenmacher were members of the same cheerleading team at a high school in Myrtle Beach. Arrest warrants that we received from the Florence County Sheriff's Office show that these new teenagers to be added to the list of suspects are accused of bringing Raper to the scene, knowing that he was armed and knowing there would be a violent confrontation. And Trey Wright was apparently no stranger to these new suspects. And what one of the new suspects posted on social media about Trey Wright really shocked us. Here it is. We found the social media of Corinne Belviso, now facing a charge of murder. On June 25th, which is the day after Trey Wright was killed, this is what she posted on her Facebook page. It is a link to the GoFundMe page for Trey Wright saying, quote, "They've made a GoFundMe to help Trey's family. If you're able to donate, anything will help. Trey was one of my friends. We're heartbroken. To know him was to love him. LLT." That stands for Long Live Trey. That has become a battle cry for people who are remembering him, honoring him, and calling for justice after his death. Before I get back to this episode of On the Case, I need to take a moment and talk about our partner.
No, we don't do that. Nope. 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 Still nope. Nope. Sorry, I don't do adverts.
Client is innocent, saying, quote, "It's really simple. She's not guilty of anything. We've hashed through the stories. She's talked with police. I'm shocked she was charged, and I will defend this case with every breath I have. She's not guilty of anything." Belviso and Kearns, 2 of the new teenagers who were just arrested and charged in this case, they have been released from jail. They were granted $20,000 bonds. Hunter Kendall was denied bond, and he is still in jail at the time of this recording. According to WPDE in South Carolina, 4 other suspects have been arrested and charged with murder in the death of Trey Wright, which brings the number at the time of this recording to 9 people who have been charged in connection to Trey Wright's death. We have reached out to the Florence County Sheriff for the names of these new suspects and information on their arrests. At the time of this recording, they have not gotten back to us. Joining us now from South Carolina to talk about this case is Tyler Bailey, civil rights and criminal defense attorney. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. What do you make? I mean, 9 suspects in this case, all charged with murder in the death of Trey Wright. What stands out to you and just how...
I'll be right back, guys, but I'll carry on playing the video. I need to get my bottle of water. Bear with.
law enforcement is going about this investigation?
Well, first, just on a human level, it's a tragedy, especially when you have young people involved in gun life. Gun violence and loss of life like this. And the first thing that went to my head was that this is kind of an unprecedented way to use the hands of one, hands of all jurisprudence, which is something that's used often in South Carolina involving gun crimes or possession of drugs, but I haven't seen it much with murder, especially when you have 9 young people. And it also appears to be a way for the local government and sheriff's office to probably combat youth violence, looking at a way to send a message that, young people and kids, teenagers, school starting back, don't assist people who have firearms and are about to engage in altercation, because you have 9 kids or younger young adults, some teenagers, some 18 or older, who actually helped the accused get to the victim, and the victim tragically lost his life. So it's really unprecedented on those fronts. And then the bail also seems to be low because these are serious allegations that kids or young people, let me rephrase that, are charged with, but the bond does not seem indicative of the seriousness of the crime, which leads me to believe that this could be a way or a tool to get them all involved in the case by law enforcement and then possibly work out deals south from there.
Yeah, because it's from what we know, several of the suspects have been released on $20,000 bonds. The man, Devin Raper, who is accused of firing the shots, he is still being held without bond. What will prosecutors have to prove in these cases of the associates of the person they say fired the shots? What will they need to prove if they were to take these to trial?
They'll need to prove that the associates knew that the accused was going to the location with the intent to commit murder of somebody. And they're using the fact that they assisted him. They knew that he had a weapon and they knew he was going to the altercation, but they're going to need to prove there was intent on the front of the associates that this was going to occur, which is tough. You know, providing assistance, accessory before the fact of the crime is easier to prove than it is actually that they all participated in the murder with the intent, knowing that the accused was going to go there and he was going to commit a murder by shooting the victim who.
Please write in the comments what you think of this case. If you think Gianna is guilty, do you think she should be on house arrest? You know, just give your thoughts in the comments section of what you believe about it. And if you're related to them, I'd like to hear from you too. You know, everyone's innocent till proven guilty. Sometimes innocent people get deemed as guilty when they weren't guilty, you know, so innocent people do go to jail. I should imagine without any firm facts, it's really hard to prove yourself innocent. And it's easier for people to say you're guilty because you were there. But just because you were there by association doesn't mean to say that you're the one that killed that person. This is on any case, not just this case. So if you could put in the comments where you're from and what you think of this case. I always read every comment. And I always say also reply to every comment. I had to think what I was going to say then. So it's just interesting. I mean, when I was growing up, I don't recall anything about knife crimes and shootings, you know, with teenagers and things. I guess today's world is a different breed. You know, all you hear now is shootings, not so much in the UK of shootings, but in the UK, there is a lot of knife crime going around. And then you get teenagers carrying a knife just for protection. So, you know, a teenager expects to be attacked. So he automatically carries a knife just to save himself, which isn't the right thing to do, you know. It's a cool world. So, you know, I don't know what's up with these teens these days. But like I said, if you make a comment, I will reply. And if you can like and subscribe, that would help me out as well. I'll carry on playing this.
Tragically lost his life. And that's a steep hurdle for the prosecution to make here.
Because Gianna Kistenmacher, who is reportedly the girlfriend of the victim, and she was the first co-suspect with Devin Raper, who was arrested, and it was believed that she was the one, according to law enforcement, who orchestrated this, knowing that the two of them were at odds, that Devin Raper was armed, and that she was bringing Devin Raper to meet Trey Wright, and then it ends in sadly, Trey Wright's death. And originally she was charged with accessory before the fact, and now she is facing a charge of murder. What is the difference between the two?
Accessory before the fact means that they provided assistance to the defendant or the accused here to further his ability to commit the crime. Accessory after the fact is when they provide assistance afterwards with knowledge. But accessory before the fact means that she knew that he was going to go there and he wanted to, use his firearm to engage in murder or attempted murder or something like that. And she helped him do it by orchestrating the whole thing. Murder, which is a lot of a steeper hurdle, means that she went there and actually helped him commit the murder. It's a little difference. It's a legal distinction. I think that the sheriff in an interview that I saw, he said that he was very methodical in speaking with the solicitor's office and investigators before upping the charges to murder for her as well. Accessory before the fact to me seems easier. And it also is something that this case could be pled down to maybe if they dismiss the murder charges later.
Because you think of some of the other people involved, and we don't know, we have arrest warrants that kind of say the same thing as Gianna Kistenmacher's arrest warrant, where it was they knew, according to this, that Devin Raper had a gun and he was going to go to Trey Wright, and they knew that there was going to be an altercation that was going to lead to his death. And then there's also reportedly video of what happened, which that hasn't been released to the public as of yet.
And what a love triangle. Don't get involved in love triangles because it'll lead to murder.
But in the case of Devin Raper, and he's accused of being the person who fires the shots, how much do the other cases, the 8 other people, does their case kind of hinge on Devin Raper? Because let's just say if he was able to be found not guilty in this for whatever reason, how does that impact then the other people who have been charged with murder if they're not the ones who were accused of firing the shots?
It'll be nearly impossible to charge the others with murder if the accused is acquitted at trial, or if this case is dismissed. I mean, the evidence seems to be pretty strong that, he fired a gun and he killed the victim here, but the other ones are being charged for what we can see based off the warrants right now for providing the assistance and helping orchestrate the murder. If he's acquitted, then there's no way that his associates or his friends or whatever you want to call them, who are also charged with murder, could be charged, because the main culprit, the shooter, would be found not guilty, acquitted, or have the charges dismissed.
And surely his DNA would be on the gun that was used. I haven't seen this case before. I've briefly seen the headlines, but I haven't seen the entire case like I'm watching it raw with you guys now. So, I've not seen the case. So I'm just going by what they're all saying, that he was the guilty one. He was the one that actually pulled the trigger and shot Trey. So I guess we'll have to see how it plays out.
At the beginning, you said kind of I forget what particular the phrase was, but when as someone who knows the law in South Carolina, how does this, and I know in a lot of ways this is unprecedented, but what are some of the similar situations you've seen where it has been a case like this has been prosecuted in the way that the Florence County prosecutors and the sheriff's office seem to be going about it?
Hands of one, hands of all typically goes like this. You'll have somebody, let's say, driving a car and there's marijuana in the car. The officers pull over the driver of the vehicle, and everybody in the car is charged with possession with marijuana with the intent to distribute, or trafficking marijuana. It could also be used with gun possession, where there's a gun in the vehicle and somebody is not authorized to be carrying the gun in the vehicle, and everybody's charged with being in possession of the firearm. This is different. This right here is a murder that's committed, and they're saying the hands of the one shooter who committed the murder is sufficient to be the hands of all of his associates who helped orchestrate the murder. That's why it seems to be unprecedented, where this appears to be more of a case.
I guess as well, they've been going through each one's phones to see if there's any text messages, or maybe they use Snapchat and was talking through Snapchat groups to orchestrate this and that. So there'd be proof there.
Of providing assistance before committing the crime for the actual accused to commit the murder, who's the shooter, versus all of them being there. We don't know what all the evidence they have. It could be text messages. We could see the video. We don't know how they all assisted in committing the murder. I do think that law enforcement probably would not want to overcharge in a situation where they risk the chances of an acquittal, not being able to prosecute all of these individuals, and there's still more who could be charged. So there must have been some strong things that we, as members of the public, do not know about. And I do think I think the sheriff is looking at the
And judging by the past, the police always hold so many cards to their chest that they don't let everyone know. So it would be interesting to be a spectator in the courtroom or a fly on the wall, as the saying goes.
The public policy here and trying to curb this type of youth violence, whether it's social media, text messages, different communications, and getting or luring somebody to a place where a violent crime occurs by charging everybody with the severe charge of murder here versus something a little lighter, like accessory before the fact.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely sends a message because, I mean, just on a human level, to know that all of this was allegedly over some teenage girl dispute, I mean, it's just not worth it. And you think of the lives that have been impacted. Certainly, Trey Wright was somebody who was beloved, and he lost his life. He was just 16 years old. There are some suspects who are under the age of 18, but it appears have been charged as adults. How does South Carolina typically go about cases where you have very serious charges, but people who are technically minors under the law.
In a case like this, where you have allegations of murder, it's all but certain they'll be charged as an adult. The prosecutor's office has discretion to charge minors as in juvenile proceedings, which are handled in family court, versus as adults, which are handled in our court of general sessions, which is felony criminal court. And here, because of the allegations of murder, the loss of life, and what they did in going about orchestrating the crime, the prosecutor's office, in conjunction with the sheriff, elected to charge everybody as adults here, which seems appropriate given the nature and loss of life.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if you're old enough to do the crime, you're old enough to do the time. And I know there's, I've seen on the news like 9, 10, 11-year-olds accused of stabbing someone and things like that. And they go to like a house where they're in there till they're sort of like reach of age, like 18 or whatever age it is that you can go to the adult jail, and then they're transferred over. But to me, they should be charged as adults, no matter their age. If they did crime, they should do the proper time and that. So I don't think there should be like halfway houses for these juvies where, life's a bit more of a luxury there, and they shouldn't deserve luxury.
How common is it that you see someone charged with murder? We were talking about bond a little bit earlier, but to get specifically into it, for someone to have that murder charge in South Carolina, but be released on a $20,000 bond?
Not common at all. That's why it seems like this is almost, I'm not going to say slap on the wrist, but a show of force, but not the actions that follow it regarding the bond doesn't seem appropriate. $20,000 bond on murder charge usually does not happen. You'll have bond being denied more frequently, maybe after several bond hearings. If the trial is taking longer to get to a jury, you may have situations where they may grant bond.
That lad there, he's just making sure that the others go down with him as well. At the moment, he probably thinks it's just him. So, it's up to his lawyers and that tell him that the others are going down as well.
Or set a speedy trial with things like a GPS monitoring, home confinement, periodic check-ins. But $20,000 bond is something that you see on drug cases, maybe even some bad DUIs, not on a murder charge. So I do understand that the others who are also accused of or being charged with murder here may have not been the shooter, but they've been charged with murder. And so just given the seriousness of the allegations, chance of being a flight risk, just because of the nature of the allegations, I know they're young, I'm pretty sure they have parental involvement. You would still think it would be more appropriate to have a bond that seemed more in line with the charge that they're accused of.
Because if even
like
someone doesn't have great
bond.
financial means and you're facing a $20,000 bond, I mean, what would you typically, the least amount that you would have to post to be able to get out of jail if you're facing that type of bond?
With a 10% surety bond, you can get a bondsman to put up, 7%. The family could put up 3%. So you're looking at that 10% of 20,000. I'm not a mathematician, but I believe that's 2,000 and another 10% of that, 200. You have a situation where somebody puts up $600, and then the bondsman puts up the rest, and then they have payment plans on it. So a $20,000 bond is really nothing for a murder charge. It's easy for somebody to take care of that. Something more appropriate could have been a $250,000 bond if you're going to give one, just because their age that they are. And even then, in most counties, people, the phrase of catch and release is something that's big here, where people are accused of violent crimes, but they're out on bond quickly. And that's something that seems to be the case here, because you have murder charges, although they're young, although they may have not been the shooter, the state elected to charge them with that high crime. So it's a little odd here, and we'll see what that looks like regarding the local community, how they feel about it moving forward.
Yeah, I know that there was, just from some local media reports, some criticism of the bonds being so low. I don't know if you saw it. Devin Raper, who's the man accused of firing the bullets, at his first court appearance, he started pleading his case in front of the judge. It was just an arraignment. The judge told him to stop. He had said something like, "Oh, there were other people there," and the judge said, "Please talk to your lawyer." Generally speaking, why is it that it is not a good idea and it's not advisable for a suspect to do that in open court?
early on in the way our South Carolina criminal cases go, you'll have a bond hearing, which is the first time that accused is before a judge. And that's simply to look at what type of bond should be set. It's not to go into the underlying allegations of the crime. And then the accused has the right to remain silent. Anything that could be used against him could be used at the trial of this case. And a bond hearing is not the time for the defendant to start testifying about the facts of it. Everything that he said then is on the record about there being others there, or it wasn't like how it's being portrayed to be. And that can be used by the prosecution later. And the judge was trying to caution him of that, to listen to your lawyer, let your lawyer do the talking, because you could jeopardize your case, even if it's something that you think is insignificant that's said before a judge, when you're testifying under oath and you don't even know what.
Well, surely his lawyers would have told him only to speak, speak when spoken to, like, yes, sir, no, sir, my name's this, date of birth, this, blah, blah, blah. So I can understand where that lad's coming from. As naughty as he's probably been, I can probably understand where he's coming from. He just wants to let the judge know he's not the only one involved in Trey's murder. So he obviously doesn't know what's happening to the others. He probably thinks they're out on the streets living life of luxury sort of thing and laughing at him. But I can understand where he's coming from.
It's all in discovery yet. So it's always advisable for, accused to listen to the counsel of their lawyers, only talk when and if you take the stand later on,
exactly,
and let your lawyer do the talking for you.
Yeah, and I'm sure a good amount of heartburn for a defense attorney if you see a client start speaking in the middle of a bond hearing, like what we saw Devin Raper do, knowing that all these other cases hinge in a lot of ways on how his case would play out. What does the timeline look like if these were to keep going forward? What does the timeline look like for how this could be prosecuted?
It's going to take some time. We have a lot of co-defendants who are charged with murder. Of course, the shooter is actually the number one. If this was a organized criminal case, who they're going to be looking to be prosecuted, but everybody else is also charged. There could be more evidence that's collected. You could have plea deals with the associates who may agree to plead to something less, with the condition that they will provide assistance to the government and prosecuting the shooter. So a timeline on this case, easily I could see 2 years for this case going to trial, if it ever goes to trial. This could be a situation, just given their age, there's several options that they could have, with whether it's a lengthy probation, charges being reduced to lower offenses of some of them, depending on what role they played. But I doubt that the state is going to want to make this case seem like a slap on the wrist. I think the $20,000 bond that they got early on the case hurts them later on, because the public is not going to be pleased if this is just something that seemed to be an overreach by the government, where they charged him with murder, slapped him with a $20,000 bond, and then later gave him probation of like 4 years. That seems like injustice for the loss of a life, if they're going to make charges like this so early in the case.
And what is the process typically? I mean, you as a criminal defense attorney, if you have a client who says, hey, look, if one of these teenagers is ready for a plea deal, they want this to go away, what is the process of how that could play out?
The prosecution is going to be the one who controls it. Criminal defense attorneys are defense for a reason. They don't control everything regarding scheduling, regarding when all the discovery is ready for the defense lawyer to review. Even if you have somebody who's rushing there and saying they're ready to plea out, things are going to be done on the prosecution's timeline. Now, that doesn't mean it could drag on and on forever. 5-6 years or something of that nature is a very long time. And the accused does have a right to demand a speedy trial if they believe they are ready to go to trial quickly. But ultimately, there's a timeline of, they're out on bond. The lawyers are working with the state in reviewing and receiving all the evidence, going over that evidence with your client, and then entering plea negotiations from there. They can reach out to see if the prosecution is ready to talk, or the prosecution will reach out on their own time. And if a deal can't be worked out, then you prepare for trial.
All right, and we'll see how this case plays out. Definitely, 9 people at this point. We'll see if any more people are charged. Tyler Bailey, always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
That will do it for On the Case.
All right, so that's that one. If I just stop sharing that one, I've got a couple more to play. Well, I'll try and find something. I don't know if this is... don't know if that's the right one. I'll play the cheerleaders. Makes a big ask in the love triangle murder case and that. So bear with me. I'm still trying to find as well Trey's GoFundMe page, which I will find in a minute. Here we go. I'll make it bigger. Oh no, I don't want to share it to my TV screen.
For the first time, a camera captures a teen girl accused of orchestrating the murder of her boyfriend. This video per WPDE television. Gianna Kistenmacher is one of 9 teens charged in the murder of Trey Wright, who is 16 years old. For the first time, we're hearing what Gianna's side of the story may be, why she cried in court as her attorney made some shocking requests, including to lift her ban on social media. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime.
She expects to live the life of luxury.
The people closest to Trey Wright have told us that he was someone who was full of life. He was life of the party, and he was also just a great friend. And that's what makes this story so heartbreaking, is the alleged betrayal that took place the night of his murder. And this is the girl who's accused of being at the center of that alleged betrayal, according to law enforcement in South Carolina. This video per WPDE television of Gianna Kistenmacher making a court appearance. She is now 18 years old, and she is charged with murder. Now, deputies say that she was not the one who allegedly fired the shots that killed Trey Wright, but she allegedly helped orchestrate the meetup with the person who did. Law enforcement alleged that she knew what was going to happen. For the first time, a camera caught Kistenmacher in court since her arrest in June of last year. Now, before we get to the requests that her attorney made in court, including asking the judge to allow her to use social media and some of the new details we have on the case that we heard in the courtroom, I want to back up for a second and just break down what we know to this point about a tragic and chaotic night when 16-year-old Trey Wright lost his life, and why a total of 9 teenagers are all facing the charge of murder in this story. So let's go back to June 24th, and that's when a call came in around 11:30 at night to the Florence County Sheriff's Office in South Carolina. Deputies needed to respond to a shooting, and they needed to get there fast. When they arrived, they found 16-year-old Trey Wright. He was fighting for his life. He had been shot.
As soon as I came out the doors, he was already lying in the middle of the road. My dad was over top of him. He wasn't really performing CPR because he had seen that Trey got shot kind of where his lungs were.
That's one of Trey's closest friends. He actually lived with her family for a period of time. And she told me that she and her dad were trying to save Trey when deputies arrived.
In that moment, all I could do was just go to Trey's side. He was gurgling and mumbling like he was trying to talk, but I had to kind of tell him that he was okay and everything was going to be okay, that he didn't need to try and say anything. He just needed to try and breathe and stay awake for us.
Trey was rushed to the hospital, and that's where he was pronounced dead. Court records describe what was a chaotic scene on the night Trey died. People crying and screaming, a young boy losing his life. Detectives in this case, they've cast a wide net. And right now, 9 teens are facing charges. And not just any charges. They're all facing the charge of murder, including the youngest suspects who are 15 and 16 years old. 2 of them, 2 of the 9, have not been named publicly because they're still juveniles in the court system. But again, all of them are facing that top charge of murder. This is the one who authorities say pulled the trigger. His name is Devin Raper. And at the time of this recording, he is the only one still being held without bond in jail. Raper and Wright followed each other on social media. And that close family friend told us that they were much more than just social media pals. They were friends in real life, which is just so incredibly heartbreaking. They were new friends. They would go to truck shows in Myrtle Beach. They didn't know each other for a long time, but they did hang out. Detectives say the night of Trey's murder, the 2 of them were at odds. And they were at odds over a girl. And that girl is the one who we just talked about making her court appearance. The girl who is charged with murder in this case. She is accused of orchestrating what happened to Trey Wright. Her name, Gianna Kistenmacher. Trey's friend told me that Gianna actually remained on scene that night after Trey was shot and deputies arrived. But she did tell me that she found something suspicious about how Gianna was allegedly acting on scene. Had you ever met Gianna?
That night was the first time I'd ever met her.
And again, I know there's things that you can say and you can't say. I mean, but she was still on scene. I guess like you saw her there when you went outside.
Yes, sir. She was still on scene. She stayed on scene till he went to the hospital, and then she went to the hospital. But his mom and them didn't know anything till I got there, or the other kids got there to let her know what was going on, because I wasn't the person who could tell her that on the phone, and I was the one who called.
In a moment, I'm going to play for you what Gianna's attorney told a courtroom about how she acted that night, what she allegedly did that night, the night that Trey was killed. Someone who was actually in a relationship with Trey Wright. Now, the police report that we have on this case, it's 10 pages long, and it does give us some good details about what deputies saw when they came on scene that night in Johnsonville, South Carolina. It was around 11:41 that law enforcement show up to this shooting. It was a chaotic scene. You had these people who are crying. I mean, you think of all these young teenagers who are now facing a charge of murder in this case, but also allegedly witnessed someone being shot and someone dying on scene. Trey was on the ground. Several people were around him, according to law enforcement. He had 2 close gunshot wounds to his chest. He was rushed to the hospital, and that's where he lost his life. Deputies say that they were told the shooter fled in a white Mazda SUV. 4 people were inside that car, and one of them had a gun and was wearing a ski mask. Deputies say when the car first arrived, Trey Wright approached it. He banged on the door. Someone opened it, and shots were fired. The deputy also writes in the report that the confrontation was planned, and it was fueled by provocative Snapchat messages. Law enforcement also say there are recordings of the incident on some of the suspects' phones. Those haven't been made public. Now, these are the 7 teenagers who we know about who are facing murder charges in this case, each of them facing that same charge that Devin Raper is facing, even though law enforcement say he's the one who pulled the trigger on Trey Wright. I also want to point out for you, this is what happened when Raper faced a judge for the first time last year.
I did not do none of this. There was 4 more people.
All right, I'm not here to try.
I understand that.
I'm not here to try your case, but you can speak to law enforcement, and you can also. They won't harm. They didn't do nothing.
That was Raper at his first court appearance, where he tried to argue his case to the judge. This video per WBTW. Now, these charges, it's a unique situation to say the least. South Carolina has a statute that's called hand of one, hand of all. And it means that an accomplice is just as guilty as the shooter. And it appears that's what prosecutors are going for in this case. They have said that they are pushing for the youngest suspects to be tried for adults as well. So those 2 people in the juvenile court system, prosecutors want to see them tried just like everyone else in this case. Now, murder is perhaps the most serious charge that we have as a society, right? And facing a murder charge, so many of us, if we were even rumored to be facing that possibility, it would be emotionally crushing. You would think. But then I want to show you what these 2 allegedly did on social media. These are suspects, 17-year-old Braylon Thompson and 17-year-old Jaden O'Clair, both now out on bond. They were granted $20,000 bonds. Court records show they bonded out the same day. We found this picture of a Snapchat post that was made by Thompson of him and O'Clair outside the Florence County Detention Center. It shows the 2 of them posing. You see O'Clair throwing up a peace sign, Thompson with his finger in his mouth showing off his teeth like he's got a grill in. The caption, "I'm free," with a racial slur. And I'm not going to say it, but it begins with the letter N. I reached out to the Florence County Sheriff to see if they were aware of this post, and they told me that they were aware. Now, the other suspects facing charges, 18-year-old Hunter Kendall, 17-year-old Sydney Kearns, and 18-year-old Corinne Belviso. Detectives say they brought Raper to the scene allegedly, and they allegedly knew that night that he was armed. And they knew, allegedly, that there was going to be a violent confrontation with the victim. All of the suspects but Raper were granted bond in this case, and they are out as this case is moving forward. And that includes.
That's why I'm glad in the UK we don't carry guns, or if they do, it's illegally. You know, I know America and other places you can have license to carry a weapon. I'm so glad that's not the case over here, because if I saw people with handguns strapped to them, it would send my anxiety over the edge. I can remember a few years ago in our local shopping centre, something had gone on and they were putting armed police at every exit of that shopping centre just as a precaution. And I can remember walking past these armed officers, seeing their rifles in their hands. It scared me shitless. It really did. I thought, what's stopping that police officer from just shooting me? You know, he might think, oh, I don't like the look of her, I'll shoot her dead. She'd be better off dead anyway, sort of thing. So, you know, and my son's always wanted to go to America. And I said he's welcome to it. You know, he can go to America on his own, or when I'm dead and buried in a box, because I'm not going to any country where they got guns willy-nilly. I can tell you that now.
For Kistenmacher, who made a recent court appearance in South Carolina. This is video per WPDE television. Now, you remember what Trey's friend told us about the night of his murder and how she allegedly felt Kistenmacher was acting on scene. Here's what Kistenmacher's attorney said in court.
She tried to drive to the hospital to be with him. Her car had a flat tire. She actually rode the aunt, I believe, to the hospital where she remained. Her parents met her there until they received news that the victim had passed away.
Kistenmacher was in court because her attorney wanted her bond conditions loosened. She's been on house arrest with GPS monitoring since she posted bond on July 28th. Her attorney claims that she's followed all of her bond conditions perfectly. And the only times that she's had to leave her house is to go to doctor's visits or when she goes to meet with her attorney. She's also been accompanied by her parents on those visits. Now, according to WPDE, the attorney went on to say during this court hearing, quote, the GPS monitoring is very expensive. What she desires to do is to be able to leave home for the purpose of work to help contribute to the cost of her record of representation in litigation. She has no access, has not had the access where she violated this condition. She has no access to social media. She is asking how she has access without the ability to post. That's a part of our request today. But essentially, based on those factors, she has not violated the bond. She is fully cooperating with the state, including the proffer agreement that she has no prior criminal record. She has no risk of flight. She is not a substantial danger to the community, and she does wish to contribute to the cause of her representation in litigation. I'm asking to remove the house arrest. I'm asking the court to remove GPS monitoring and to remove no access to social media, prohibiting her from posting. Under the circumstances, she will continue to cooperate as her stated intention. Now, this is how the prosecutor responded to that. He said, quote, these individuals have traveled from Horry County to Johnsonville, knew without a doubt they were traveling there for some sort of violent confrontation. There's no escaping that. There are differing opinions inside both those vehicles, whether at the time that they arrived, that they knew the shooter was in possession of a gun. However, they knew he was in possession of the gun just before leaving. They saw him firing a gun at one location, and then there was an altercation that was captured on video. Judge, on cell phone video that shows they placed the Johnsonville group, including the victim, in the case on FaceTime, and the shooter actually produced a gun and holds it at the camera and says, I'll come down there and I'll kill you. So they knew there would be a violent altercation. They should have known that it might have led to more, and it certainly did. Now, her defense attorney is absolutely right that she has been fully cooperative. She continues to cooperate with the state, and her cooperation is important in this.
Yes, but if all that is removed from her, so she's free to do what she wants to do within reason, what's to say, you know, she's not going to do something wrong? You know, at the moment under bond, she's a goody two-shoes because she can't do nothing. You know, she's not allowed to leave the house willy-nilly. She can't go on social media, which most teens would love to be able to do. And some teams, their phone's glued to their hands. But, you know, yeah, okay, she's not the one that pulled the trigger, but she was still part of the group that involved the murder of Trey. If she is set, and I haven't seen the outcome of this news bit that I'm showing you, if all her conditions are dropped and she's allowed to do what she wants to do, go to work, things like that, you don't know what she's going to get up to behind the scenes. You know, I guess that if she's still on bond here and thing, if she does put one foot out of place, she'd go straight back where she was or even into jail. But I don't know. You know, people might have mixed feelings. Those two lads definitely didn't deserve to be out on bond. because of their behavior in the car park. But maybe this girl does, maybe she should be given the chance to go and find work and help to pay for lawyers and things. But it could also be just a story, just to get her off, so that she's got a bit of free will and be able to go outside doing what she wants to do.
This case, after hearing from a representative from the victim's family, I will leave this court's discretion as to modifying the conditions of the bond. However, I will be vehemently opposed to lifting that social media ban. I think we can all agree that that's kind of the reason all of this transpired in the first place. There's an argument in social media, and we all see that time and time again. So I would be bitterly opposed to the social media portion of the bond conditions. I'd like for that ban to stay in place. End quote. After hearing the arguments, the judge decided to lift Kistenmacher's house arrest condition to allow her to go to work, but she does have to be home between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. And she is also only allowed to leave to go to those doctor's appointments or to meet with her attorney. Joining us now to talk about this case, once again, is Tyler Bailey, criminal defense attorney, civil rights attorney. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. And there's a lot of layers to this story when we talk about Trey Wright and what police say happened to him back in June of last year. But this was really the first time for the girl who was at the center of this case, who's accused of kind of orchestrating everything. She appears in court and she wants her bond conditions changed. And the first thing I want to ask you about is the social media part of it. Because when you look at this case, and this is what prosecutors said, like kind of at the crux of it was an issue on social media, and yet she's asking to get back on social media. What did you make of that request?
This entire case has been a different one with the amount of kids who are being charged with murder. And it appears that the prosecutor and the court, they're looking at new tools to address the problems that we're having today with youth violence. So social media was a big part in this case. And that's why it was a bond condition. And we also talked earlier about how it's not normal for accessories before the fact they actually be charged with murder in situations like this. And it appears that the prosecutors are trying to get to the root cause of a lot of the issues in this case, and social media being one of them. That's why it was a bond condition that they wanted.
And for the defense, though, to say, because this is someone who is facing a murder charge, and I know we'll talk about kind of how things work in South Carolina, where she's not the one who pulled the trigger, but they allege that she's the one who brought the person who did pull the trigger to have this altercation that they allege that she knew was going to be violent. And I could see someone on the outside say it's not a great look for someone facing that charge to be like, well, I'd like to get on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it may be. What's typically the calculation there when you're asking for bond conditions to change, where, how much do you value maybe the public looking at it and being like, I don't know if social media is something that you should get back on?
I think this may be one of those situations where the defense lawyer and the client may have had a difference. This is a young person who likes to be on social media. It probably was a big part of her life, as it is a part of countless people's lives across the world at this point. And it's not the best look because it makes you look essentially spoiled, like you're asking for a luxury and somebody lost their life. But here, the defense lawyer asked that her client be allowed to get back on social media. I probably wouldn't have wanted to ask that, but at the end of the day, lawyers have to zealously represent their clients, and the client, she may have really wanted to get on this. Unless she's trying to make some money to pay her legal fees and for GPS monitoring off of social media. That's the only other legitimate reason I could see for her need to be on it, but there's nothing in the record that shows she has a history of making money from her social media handles.
And for people who are just kind of getting started in understanding this case that's been going on since last year, and you have these 9 teenagers, we know 7 of their names, 2 of them believe are still in the juvenile court system, but they're all charged with murder. They're all facing the same charge as Devin Raper, who's the one who's accused of firing the shots that killed Trey Wright. What is the statute, when you explain in South Carolina, of how this works, where someone who may have been aware that an altercation could occur could actually be facing the same charge as the person who fired the shots that killed the victim in the story?
Generally in South Carolina, we have a theory called the hands of one is the hands of all. So one person who is actually the trigger person here, but the associates, friends who assisted him in getting there, whether providing transportation, location, they could all be charged with the same crime as the actual perpetrator. Is often seen in cases like gun possession, if a gun is in a vehicle, or drugs and being in the vehicle. It's not often that's used in a situation like a murder in this case, but the prosecutors here charge most of the teenagers involved with murder, actually the same as the perpetrator. And it seems to be that they're trying to get ahead of some of the problems that we're seeing with youth violence, gun crime amongst younger people. And then you got the social media aspect of it between some of the FaceTime videos, social media contact. And it looks like kids not taking these things seriously, but you have somebody who lost their life and the court showing everybody involved that this is serious and needs to stop.
When someone applies, like in this case, a prosecutor using a particular statute where it's typically not used, but you can maybe see where they're going for in this. What are some of the challenges that a lawyer could face in getting a jury to kind of come on board with that and to see things the way that they're seeing it, of saying, well, they all knew that there was this beef going on between Trey Wright and Devin Raper, and they knew that if they brought Devin to the party, that allegedly something was going to go down that was going to be violent, and that's exactly what happened.
Prosecutors, like defense lawyers, they have to maintain their credibility before the court and jury, the jurors in this case. And it could be a problem with the jurors believing this is prosecutorial overreach, that they're extending the bounds of the law here, and it should not be applied to all of the individuals, teenagers here, because it's kind of hard to say that they knew that he was going to commit the murder. A young person, he did have a gun. So what the prosecution would say, what did you think was going to happen? But there's nothing to show that these kids or young teenagers knew exactly what they're going to do. And if he had a history of being involved in shooting. So it's a stretch, but they could be found guilty. More importantly, it looks like the prosecution is using it for leverage. You see the young lady here, she's entered into a proffer agreement, which she's essentially means she's cooperating with the government to some extent. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the others enter into proffer agreements and they're charged with accessory before the fact, and the murder charges are ultimately dismissed by the prosecution.
Right, because when someone says a proffer agreement, and that's what the attorney said in open court, that she is following with it, is that meaning, you have all of these people that were allegedly witnesses to what happened to Trey Wright, that she could, pretty much helping law enforcement understand what happened and build a case and potentially testify down the road?
That's 100% correct. You're sitting down with law enforcement. You essentially are waiving your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. You're talking to the prosecutors, law enforcement about your involvement, what you know. You have to be completely honest and forthcoming with the prosecution. They take that information and they can use it against you or others. But for part of the proffer agreement, if you ultimately cooperate, they could decide not to prosecute you. They could lower the charges and they could use that information to prosecute others.
And when you look at this case, because you have one person, and as much as the law says, you're just as guilty as the person who pulled the trigger, he is still being held without bond. She and the 7 others are all out on bond. And like for her, she's able to go to work. She's able to go to doctor's appointments. She can meet with her lawyer. She has her freedom to an extent compared to waiting out a trial in the county jail, where it still seems like the others that are charged with murder but aren't the ones who fired the shots, that they're not really being treated the same way as when you typically think of what a murder suspect goes through in the pretrial process.
Yeah, the court can recognize and distinguish the difference between the accessories versus the perpetrator. So that's why they were able to get bond. They have different conditions of their bond. You see here, even the ask about being on social media shows, and the court was inclined to hear it, but ultimately ruled against it, that the court can tell the difference, just like jurors will be able to tell the difference between the actual shooter and somebody who participated in a lower capacity. So although the prosecution has charged them all, the record is showing that the decision makers, right now the only decision maker is the judge regarding things like bond. They can tell the difference between a person who may have a lower culpability and responsibility in what happened versus somebody who's the actual trigger person in this situation who's still sitting in jail with bond being denied.
according to the law enforcement documents we have, at the center of this case are these social media messages, and really the center of this case, according to law enforcement, is Gianna Kistenmacher, because she was the one who was between Trey Wright and Devin Raper, and then there's this these social media messages that were sent back and forth, and then she is being accused of kind of being the person that orchestrated this meetup that then ends in Trey Wright's murder. For if she, cooperating with the government, is there a way that she walks out of this without having any sort of a punishment whatsoever if that murder charge is dropped? Where if she cooperates and gives everything, what is the expectation typically in one of these agreements of what she gets in return?
I don't think there's going to be any situation where all charges are dismissed and she walks away as if nothing happened. If that was the case, it really would set bad precedent for what this prosecutor's office has done by charging them all with murder, simply to dismiss serious allegations against the young lady here and the others who may be involved. I do see there's possibly a situation, given their young age, if the murder charges are dismissed, if they're charged with being accessory, before the fact and providing assistance to Draper, who ultimately did the shooting here, then they could possibly get probation. You can get credit for time served with the time that she's been on GPS monitoring, on house arrest. There's some creative things that defense lawyers in the court and prosecution could come up that she has some sort of punishment, but it's not to the extent of murder. And still, there still is no telling. Who knows? You can get a judge who's not inclined to hear anything like that, and he actually wants her to do some time in the Department of Corrections. All things are on the table, but I think from what I'm hearing from just with listening in on this case, seeing how the judge ruled, looking at the proffer agreement, I see this being a situation where some charges are dismissed and she gets a lesser penalty than one would expect for a murder case.
When you look at cases where this statute is typically used, I know that this is a unique situation. I mean, how likely is it for the people who are not those who fired the shots, where if they, go down the path where they're at trial, or even if they take a deal, like the likelihood that someone could walk away from this and not spend time in prison?
I think if you're charged simply with murder and you did not pull the trigger, you could possibly get a not guilty, because jurors will got to hear the facts of the case. And one thing that's going to stick in their brains are going to be, this person was the actual shooter. That's one thing. They didn't pull the trigger. And proving to a jury that the accessory before the fact knew exactly what he was going to do, and their knowledge and assistance is the same as being the trigger man, is a stretch. So I think the jury in Florence County could acquit some, so there's a chance that you could walk away. The stronger tool that the prosecution has is that if you're convicted for a murder, you're going to jail for a long time. Why roll the dice at their young age? Possibly cooperate with the government and see if you can get a plea deal for something less, get some probation, and hopefully move on the rest of your life in a productive way, where this could be a lesson versus being something that sticks with them as a detriment for their entire lives.
And then just going back to the request that Kistenmacher's attorney put in to allow her to get back on social media to some extent. And, again, I could see people from the outside that might look at that and be like, that's a pretty aggressive request considering what's going on, might not be the best look. When it comes to just generally making a request, when it comes to bond conditions, like, why do you need to almost toe a line and make sure you do things kind of that might not be a bad look, opposed to someone saying, well, the worst the judge could say is no? What's the lasting impact if you say make a request that might be something that people might furl their eyebrows at?
Well, you're going to have the same prosecutors who are involved in all aspects of the case, and you don't want to lose credibility with them as a defense lawyer with certain asks. You need to ask the things that are in good faith. You also want to believe in your arguments that you make. You don't want to just be making a half argument and the defense doesn't believe you believe it, the judge doesn't believe you believe it, and that hurts your credibility going into a trial, which is very important. You want to be credible at all aspects of the case. And as a defendant, as a person, you also don't want to look like you're entitled, that you feel like, why you have to participate in the court system, because that can lead to less favorable plea deals for you later on. if the prosecutors and decision makers, have feel some type of a way about you. And importantly, I think with the court here, the defense may have tried to make it seem as if this was a small thing, social media. But I think what the judge recognized is that social media is really the crux of this case. This is really the heart of it. And so a bond condition saying no social media is a big deal here. And it sets precedent that social media use can actually be used to contact witnesses. It can be contact family members. You can do a whole lot of damage, as we see on social media. And so I think it's a tool that other courts and prosecutors, defense lawyers need to be prepared to address in the future, especially with young people now, because an altercation starts in school, goes on social media, and crimes like this could happen later on.
Yeah, and in this case, there's just a lot of interesting things at play. Of course, at the end of the day, you have the loss of a life and so many people impacted. Tyler Bailey, criminal defense attorney, civil rights attorney, thank you as always for being with us on Law and Crime. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That will do it for
that's that. So what do you all think about that then? Do you think she should have been allowed access to social media? To look for jobs on social media, because nowadays you can find a job on social media rather than going through websites. So I'd like to know what you all think about it. It's quite an interesting and unusual case because there is 9 suspects, but only one person pulled the trigger. And if you like the topic today, if you can like and subscribe, and then that way you're notified whenever I release other videos. I try and do at least one a day, simply because I'm new to this. I've only been doing it about 2.5 weeks now. So I'm trying to get out there by doing, at least one a day. But sometimes I have been doing 4, 5, 6 a day, just short ones, so not hour-long ones. But sometimes I'm just scrolling around and I find it struggle to find a case that I think is worthy to cover. So if you know of any cases that haven't been covered or not as covered as much as it should be, drop me an email. It's truecrimes2026@gmail.com. If you fancy buying me a coffee, the coffee link's there. Just go on to buymeacoffee.com, type in my name, Kathy P, and you can click to buy me 1 coffee if you want to. Or if you're feeling really generous, you could buy me 2. Then that way I don't have to sit here freezing my backside off. It doesn't help when you're drinking ice cold water straight from the fridge, though, does it? Yeah, so till the next one, I'll see you later. Bye.